Hello, Guyanese. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you had a very good weekend. Um, I want to just where I left off the last video when I spoke of Guyana getting 60% share of our oil revenue. And I'm saying this in the context that countries around the world, um, many of them are receiving much more than 60% of their oil revenue. And Guyana should also follow that pattern. And I'm appealing to the President, Mr. Vice President, you have the authority to do it. I'm also calling on Mr. Raphael Trotman. Mr. Trotman, if you're an attorney, if you can do an affidavit that the oil companies force you, Exxon, force Guyana to sign under duress, or they blackmailed us, or whatever they do, you are the attorney, you know the technical terms that you can use. If you do that, Mr. Trotman, and it goes to court, a court of law, more likely than not, will rule that the contract is null and void. If that is the case, Mr. Trotman, with all the negativity that came from the signing of this contract, you will become Guyana's hero. Mr. President Granger, you and Mr. Trotman was responsible for this contract. If you can save us from this contract, please do, sir. Guyana will be eternally grateful to you. Mr. Trotman, you're the man in charge. You signed the contract. You said it can be renegotiated. But if you will file an affidavit to the courts that the contract was signed under duress or were blackmail or whatever strategy the Exxon used, a competent court of law is likely to rule that the contract is null and void. And if that is true, then we can start the process for a new contract. And Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, please engage Mr. Trotman. You guys, we need to work together on this. This is not a PNC or an APNU or a coalition or a PUP issue. This is an issue for all Guyana, and we want all heads on the table. We want everyone to be on the table. And Mr. President, the people in Guyana love you. As we heard last night on our program on GlobeSpan, you have the highest ratings of all previous presidents, even Dr. Jagan. So imagine how popular you are with the Guyanese electorate. If you can get this done, bring Mr. Trotman in. Let us work together. Mr. Attorney General, please don't say it's not negotiable. It is. And if Mr. Trotman can sign an affidavit saying that this contract is null and void, we're on the right track. Let us begin that process. But I want to start this session this morning by bringing up this report, and I want to give it the entire screen, and I will expand it. So this is showing us globally the government takes from their oil revenue. And this is from Rystad. I know some people will put them down, some will, whatever it is, but this is what it says. It says all the way from Colombia, Canada, UK, Angola, Russia, US, India, Kazakhstan, Venezuela, China, Norway, Libya, Malaysia, Indonesia, Algeria. These are all producing countries. They take more than 60% of their revenue that stays in their country. They have not put Saudi Arabia or UAE and so on, because I believe they got much more than this. But this is what we're seeing, and I'm saying that Guyana, if we get 60% as I suggested, I think we're on the right track to do great for our country. And Mr. President, please, I'm appealing to you. You can get it done if you want to. Mr. Vice President, Mr. Attorney General, please come together. Mr. Trotman, we need you on deck. We need you on board. Let us get this contract redone. The last time we spoke, I talked about the income from this our oil revenue. And I'm saying with 11 billion barrels of oil, as we know the reserve now, and I'm sure it will be more as we go on, with 1 million barrels a day at $80 per barrel, that will be 80 million US per day, or 29 billion annually. We are told that by 2025-26, we'll have 1.2 million barrels a day. With 1.2 million barrels a day at $80 per barrel, that's 96 million per day, or 35 billion annually. If Guyana were to get 60% of that, that will give us $21 billion a year. But I want to bring this up as well. I want to show that if we have 11 billion barrels, let me just format that so you can see it's 11 billion. At 11 billion barrels, and I'm gonna bring this, I'll put into, okay. So the gross revenue, from 11 billion barrel, and if you use $80 per barrel, it'll be 11 billion times $80, right? If that is so, then this will be, let me bring that up. Okay, that would be $880 billion. With 11 billion barrels a day, our reserve, is 11 billion barrels. At $80 per barrel, total gross revenue is 880 billion. If Guyana take, and we get 60%, that is what I am proposing. If we were to get 60% of that, that'll be 880 times 0.6, or 60%. That would be, okay, I didn't use times 0.6. That will give us, let me bring that bigger. That will give us $528 billion in the life of our oil. This is what I'm talking about. I don't think the oil company will not make money. The oil company will make a lot of money. So if you take away 880 from 528, they still have $352 billion. So they're going to make substantial money. They're not going to lose anything. That's what they will get. But let's look and see if this goes up to 15 billion. And as we speak, we know they're exploring more oil. This is what will happen. Revenue is 1.2 trillion. Our share is 720 billion. The oil company still gets 480 billion. Now, Venezuela next door has a reserve of about 300 billion barrels. I'm not saying we have that much, but I believe we have substantially more than 15 billion barrels. And I want to use a figure. Let's use 50. Let's say we have 50 billion at the end of the day. And we will, only time will tell. This is what's going to happen. At 50 billion barrels of oil reserve, at $80 per barrel, that's 4 trillion US dollars. Guyana's share of 60% is 2.4 trillion over the life of our resource. Oil company gonna walk away with a handsome 1.6 trillion. It's not that they're losing money. So Mr. President, Mr. Vice President, Mr. George, Mr. Trotman, please, sir, you can, all three of you can be Guyana's greatest hero if we get this agreement redone. Not renegotiate. I believe we should see all the reason why this contract is null and void, and a competent court will rule. If, Mr. Trotman, you can tell the world and tell us that this contract that you signed was under duress, or you were blackmailed, or whatever the reason. You are the attorney. You know what terminology you can use. And if we can get this contract voided, we can start a new process. Forget about all the other conditions to it. Let us get 60% revenue and we'll talk about the rest. So let's say we get 21 billion with 1.2 million barrels a day. 21 billion in revenue to the government of Guyana. This is what I'm proposing. I am proposing that 1 billion of that goes into an insurance coverage fund. And when I say a fund, I mean that we put Guyana's, from the 21 billion that we'll receive, we put $1 billion into this fund, and we ask the oil company to also match it with $1 billion. With that $2 billion a year, we can do a couple things. One, we get our local guys, all our insurance brokers in Guyana, let them work a consortium and say, guys, listen, now go out there and get us the best coverage, whatever the number is, 10 billion, 20 billion, 30 billion in insurance coverage. They will get a nice chunk of commission on the premium, which is good for the local boys. You know, we need to enjoy, really live our wealth, and we are giving it away. So let us stop that. So if we can get 2 billion into the fund every year, use part of that for insurance coverage, and the other part I suggest also we use some technology, maybe some ships out in the Atlantic with all the equipment necessary. So in case there's an oil spill or anything to that effect, they can quickly try to mop up the oil so that it won't spread to the Guyana coastline or to the Caribbean. That will reduce the amount of insurance we need, so we can balance that. At the end of the period of our oil exploration, when the wells go dry, whatever remain in the account, and don't forget, we will have 2 billion a year. We take out a part of that for insurance coverage and to maintain ships who are traversing our territory to ensure that there is no oil spill, or if there is one, they can mop it up quickly. There will still be substantial fund of it in the account. And don't forget, we will invest that in the market. And if we get 25% income per year on that, that fund will continue to build and build and build. At the end of the oil, the wells are dry and the game comes to an end, they cap the wells. Whatever remains in the account, 50% goes to Guyana, 50% goes to the oil companies. And I think that's a reasonable stand. So that's one thing I'll do. The second thing I'll do is that I have 310,000 there, but I think it's more like 300,000 household. So if we have 300,000 household, and I'm saying that if we use the funds that we're getting, 21 billion, and we give each household $3,000 a year, 600,000 Guyana dollars, that's 900 million. We give them $4,000 a year, 800,000 Guyana dollars, that's 1.2 billion. Professor Clive Thomas has suggested $5,000 a year for every household. There'll be 1 million Guyana dollars, and that's 1.5 billion from the revenue that we'll receive. So this is some numbers I just pick at random. We can use any numbers. But I'm saying that once we get that kind of revenue, each household should benefit from that revenue. The first thing is take out the insurance protection. Secondly, the household must benefit. Then we need to look at the sovereign wealth fund. Again, how much do we put into the sovereign wealth fund? We have about 800,000 Guyanese now. That will grow exponentially later on. But if you put 3,000 per person into the sovereign wealth fund, that'll be 2.4 billion a year. 4,000 per person, 3.2 billion. 5,000 per person, 4 billion a year. I don't know what the combination is right, but let's say we use 5,000 per household and 3,000 per person into the sovereign wealth fund. That will be quite a bit. And think of putting 2.4 billion for 30 years. So if we put 2.4 billion and we do that for 30 years, that'll be $72 billion in the fund. But don't forget, every year, 25% growth on the fund, that will be almost $200 billion at the end of 30 years. From that fund alone, Guyana can finance all of its operation. Everything we can, only the earnings from the fund. Leave the capital and whatever is in the fund there. But think of it this way. If that was, okay. So let's look at if we took 4,000 or 5,000. This is what it will be. 96 billion over the years, 120 billion over the 30-year period, whatever the number is. Again, these are only suggestions, and I really strongly recommend. First thing, for this to be possible, Mr. Trotman, you'll have to step up, sir. You will need to really come up and let the Guyanese people know that you're really a hero. And if you can come and tell us exactly what happened, sign an affidavit, let's file it in the court, let the court make the decision. A competent court will not allow this contract to continue if it was signed under duress or blackmail or whatever the legal term is. You are an attorney, you know it. Mr. Attorney General, you can work with Mr. Trotman. Come up with something. Don't work on the sides of all companies. They're fine. They will make a lot of money. Whichever position we take, they will make a lot of money. Let us also get our fair share. So next video, I will continue the sharing of our revenue. But for now, God bless our great country of Guyana. Thank you.